Hello friends, in today's video we're going to be discussing the concept of soft delete. We're going to be seeing how we can implement soft delete inside our .NET Web API, when to use it, when not to use it, and what's the benefit of actually having it inside our application. So let's get started. What I have here is I have my Formula 1 Web API, and basically this is a very simple Web API which contains two controllers. Every single controller have its normal CRUD operation, and it's a very simple implementation. We have unit of work for our data services, and we're utilizing SQLite to store our information as our database to store our information. So now if I run my application, we can see right now my application is running. If I go to my web browser, we can see it's running within Swagger. Yes, this application is running on .NET 9 and I'm still using Swagger just because of the simplicity of it. So now we can see here, if I try to get all drivers, I think there's one single driver available in my database. We can see here that I have Sir Lewis available, and what I want to do is I'm gonna add a new driver. So I'm just gonna add myself as a driver. I'm gonna say Mohamad, Lawand, and driver number 23, execute. I got my 201, and now if I got all drivers, I should be able to see that I have two drivers. So now this driver here, let's say I wanna get my information. So if I come here, get driver by ID, I provide my new ID, and we can see here I was able to retrieve my driver information. And if I click on delete, we can see I got my 204, which means that the deletion has went successfully. And now if I try to retrieve my information, we got now a 404 that this record has not been found, which is a very simple implementation. But now, where does soft delete comes into place? So usually, whenever we're trying to do any types of delete, this information is lost forever. We are not able to retrieve it once the data has been removed from our database, unless we have some kind of a backup or a point-in-time backup for that specific information. This data is lost. But usually when you're trying to work with a big, large system where you have a lot of sensitive information, usually deleting items from the database is not recommended. What we need to do is we need to have a concept where we're actually hiding stuff that we don't want from the front end, or basically from our background services, mimicking it's deleted, but actually storing this information inside our database and keep using it on the long run. And this is where the concept of a soft delete comes into place. Soft delete is basically give you the illusion that the record has been deleted, but in reality, this record actually still exists inside our database. Let's see how we can implement this inside our application. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back to Rider, and I'm gonna stop my application here, and I'm gonna go to my entities. This is where the magic trick is gonna come into place. I'm gonna close this. I'm gonna open my entities. And as you can see here, I have my DB set, and within this DB set, I have my drivers entity, which is represented inside my database. It has a first name, last name, driver number, and date of birth, and it's inheriting from a base entity. So if we open the base entity, we can see here I have my ID, my added date, and my updated date. So basically every single item from my database entity will be having these three properties directly in the tables. As well, for the achievements, I have here race wins, pole position, fastest lap, etc. And we can see I have a relationship with the drivers table, and I'm also inheriting from the base entity. So now if I open my database inside my DB viewer, if I right click and click on added data, we can see here that I have the information directly available for me here as well, so I can verify that all of the records are there. So now where does soft delete come into place? So the way that we can actually implement soft delete is basically by adding the following. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a new property, and it's going to be of type integer. You can do it with any types of property. I'm just going to tell you the way that I like to do it. And I'm going to say here status. And what does the status mean? So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be utilizing this status here as a soft delete implementation. So what that means is if the status is equal to 1, it means it is active. And if it's equal to 0, it means it's deleted. So what I'm gonna do is whenever a new driver is being created, I'm gonna basically attach the status to equal to 1. So this means that the driver is available. And whenever I want to delete it, I don't really delete the record. At the other hand, I'll basically just update the status and I will be able to hide it. So let's see how we can do this. So now, as you can see here, I have this gonna be available inside my drivers, and the same thing is gonna be available inside my achievements. And now, because I have these two properties are going to be duplicated across the two classes, what I can do is instead of having them inside my two different entities, what I can do, I can just put it inside my main entity, which is base entity, and both of them will now inherited by default. So now that I have added inside my base entity, both my drivers and my achievement will have this property available for them, which is great. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my terminal and I'm going to navigate to my Formula 1 entities. Actually, I'm going to navigate to my data service, and what I'm going to do inside my data service is I'm going to create a new migration. So I'm going to put .NET F migrations, and I'm gonna say add soft delete. I'm gonna put a startup project, and this startup project is gonna be my Formula 1 API. So now this is gonna run, it's gonna do all of the magic and build it. And now if I go to my data service, I'm gonna open my migrations and I'm gonna open my soft delete. And if we go down, we can see here now my table drivers is gonna add a new column, which is called status and of type integer. And we can see the default value is 0. Again, for the migration that I also have, the added column, and here we're for the table achievements of name status and the type of integer, and the default value is 0. So what I want to do here is I want to change the default value from 0 to 1. So that means that all of my current records inside my database will be directly available for me. So I'm just going to update this from 0 to 1, and now this will make it available for me directly. I can have added it inside my configuration, but now or basically inside my entity, but for now I just want to keep it inside my migration. So now that I have done this, the next step I'm gonna put .NET EF database update, and I'm gonna put startup dash project, and it's gonna be my Formula 1 API. So now this is gonna run and the migration has finished. So now if I close this, and now if I open my drivers, I'm gonna just click on modify table so we can see all of the columns. Now we can see here I have a status column which has been added, which is great. And now also for the achievements, if I go back and click on modify table, I should be able to see that the status column has been added. Okay, perfect. So now it means that my table now has a soft delete implementation there, but my code doesn't. My code still thinks that whenever I'm creating something, it will automatically add it with the status is going to be by default 1, but then it does not understand the delete because my query is directly removed from the database. So let's see how we can actually fix that. So now if I'm going to come back here, I'm going to close my migration and open my repositories, and let me look at my driver repository. So once again, inside my driver repository, it's pretty straightforward. I'm getting my DB set, I'm ordering by date added, and I'm returning the list. For the deletion, I'm checking if it exists or not. And then basically what I'm doing is I'm removing it from the database. And that's basically it. So when it comes to driver deletion, and similarly here for the deletion is the same thing. And when I'm getting everything as well, I'm just getting everything and ordering by added date. So that's not what we want to do. So we're going to start first by actually updating my mapping profiles, because basically right now I'm utilizing AutoMapper in order for me to map my objects. So what I want to do is whenever there's a new request coming in, I want to update it. So if I run my application right now, let's see what's going to happen. We can see my application now is running. If I go to my web browser, I go all the way down where I'm posting a driver. I'm just going to update this to Mohamad 1, click on execute. We got a 201. We can see here now by default the status is 0. And now if I click on get all drivers, we'll be able to see that I'm getting Mohamad back. And if I get driver by ID, let me get Mohamad's ID from here. Let me copy this and let's add it here, execute. And now we can see we got Mohamad's information back. Perfect. But now if I do delete, it's going to be deleted. And if I check my database and I go to drivers and I'm going to check added data, now we can see here that Mohamad's record has been added. But you can see here the status by default is 0 because currently my mapping does not really understand what it needs to do with this. So for this reason, I need to go to my mapping profile. And what I want to do is whenever I'm adding a driver, I want to actually update or basically give it an information to set the status. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to put dot for member and I'm going to specify the destination. I'm going to put the destination dot status, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to define the option map from, and it's going to be pretty straightforward. I'm going to say it's going to by default give it 1. So now if I stop actually my application and run it again, I'm going to come back here, and whenever I'm trying to add a new driver, I'm just going to use the same information, but instead of 1 I'm just going to put 2 to execute. And now if we go down here, we can see that the status has now been updated to 1 by default. And now basically I have 3 drivers. And now if I go back to my database, check the information inside my table, that's not it, added data. And if I go all the way to the end, we can see here that now Mohamad 2 has status 1. Perfect. So the first step is done. I'm able to add a status dynamically there. So what's the second step? The second step is I'm going to stop my application. I'm going to update my repository. So basically right now, I'm going to update my driver repository. So instead of every time I'm just getting everything inside my database for my get all, what I want to do is I want to add a condition. And this is where it's going to separate the deleted from the non-deleted. So I'm going to put dot where x.status equal to 1. So what does this mean? So what I'm doing here, I'm telling my entity framework is get me all of the records with a status equal 1. And we said status equal 1, it means that the driver is active, so it's not been deleted. And what I'm going to do also, I'm going to add an implementation for get driver by ID. And I'm going to change this to override. And for the get driver by ID, I'm going to here returning, let's remove the virtual. I'm going to return here the driver. And basically what I want to do is I don't want to just return this. What I want to do is I'm going to add my condition. So I'm going to put here first or default async. I'm going to add my condition. So I'm going to put x ID equal ID and x.status equal to 1. So now what this means is also when I'm getting a driver by ID, I'm also making sure that it's only the active driver or the non-deleted driver is being returned. So that's the second step. And the third step that I want to do is I want to update my delete. So instead of actually removing the information from my database, what I want to do is when I'm actually doing a delete, I'm going to put result.status equal to 0. And I'm going to put result updated date equal to date to UTC now. And this is what I want to do. So instead of deleting, I'm just going to be switching the status. And this is where soft delete is going to come into place. It's all going to be around status management rather than actually removing data from my database. So now that I have this in place, I can actually implement the same thing for my achievements. But for now, I'm just going to do it for my driver. I'm going to run this. And now if we go back here, now if we click on this, Mohamad 1 has a status of 0, so this should not appear here because by default it's being considered as deleted. So now if I click on execute, we can see I only got my 2 drivers, which is perfect. So now let's say I want to delete the second driver, which is Mohamad 2. If I come here and first of all, let's get the driver information. So I'm going to click on execute. We can see the information is available for me. So now if I click on delete again, we can see I got a 204, which means that the driver has been deleted. And now if I come back here and I click on get driver by ID, I should be getting here a not found. And this is right, we're getting a 404 not found. It means that the driver is not here, it's been deleted. But now let's check in the database and see if that's true or not. So now if we go back here and let's check the information inside my database, we can see here that the updated date has been updated, where basically my information has been updated now. And we can see both the statuses are 0 and my information is still persist in my database. And this is the key point here. My information is persisted, but my application is not returning that it's actually not know anything about it, because it all depends on the status management and how that status management is actually manipulating the data. So you might think to yourself, okay, that's really good, but do I really need this? Why can't I just remove the information from the database and save it? So in a lot of scenario, deleting information from the database, it is perfectly fine. There is no problem with deleting information from the database. But in certain applications, you have some kind of a requirement where you need to protect the users. You need to protect your applications from the user's action. So for example, the user might delete something really sensitive that they should not have been deleted. The user, for example, might delete something and they regret deleting it, and then they ask you to restore it. And if you're actually removing it, by this time it's too late. You need, for example, for regulatory requirement, you need to keep some kind of a data in your database to, for example, to showcase this is the history of a transaction and you're not losing any data, etc., etc. So there is a lot of requirements where you actually need to keep all of the data that currently exists inside your database, and deleting is not an option. But you don't really want to show all of this information to the users. So this is where a soft delete and the status management will come into place. This has been a very quick introduction about soft delete and how we can actually manage it inside our .NET Web API and what's the benefit of it. If you have any questions, please make sure you put them in the comments down below. If you'd like to support me, please consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a member of this channel where you'll get access to the source code. Thank you very much for watching and have a great day.